And we're back. Yeah, so I go through the same process to start the show every week. And the stream didn't kick on Twitch because this time, when I went to include Twitch and did the same thing I've been doing everything for the last several years now, the little toggle switch was off. Why was the toggle switch off on Twitch? I don't have any idea. I don't have any idea, and I don't care. Yeah, I think we'll just go right to questions. Joe Roth. Bill, what's your honest feeling and prediction about the 2024 election? Do you think Trump wins again, or do you think it'll be a repeat of the 2020 shenanigans, or do you think the Republicans will play the Democrats' own game and ballot harvest, and we wind up winning that way? The 2022 midterms were alarming because voter turnout was really low on our side, but we still outvoted the Democrats nationally by over 3 million votes. Also, do you think Trump will reignite our side to go out and vote this time in 2024? Disgruntled Trump voters didn't show up in 2022 because they felt there was really no point. I think we have way too many rhinos and establishment Republicans working against us hand in hand with the entire media, Fox now included, and I kind of feel like we don't have a prayer anymore. Way too many dimensions to overcome for us to win. I think we will lose through cheating and manipulation, of course. I think Republicans will be in the minority for the next generation or two. I think the tide against us is too strong to overcome. What's your honest prediction as of right now for 2024? We win, we lose, or we win, but they cheat again? I know your opinion can change depending on upcoming events, but right here, right now, what say you? There is a margin beyond which they cannot cheat. I don't know what that margin is, but it is. They can when you consider how close most national elections are, they come down to 52-48 kind of thing. And I know they've been cheating, and I don't think there's any question about that. But then that's the way it is. And if we had turned out in 2022, then we could have produced a margin of victory greater than the margin of fraud. But we didn't do that. So this is the story of my life since I've been doing this since 2008. I watched it happen in 2008 with McCain, and I watched it in 2012 with Romney, and then I watched it in 2016 was an off year. I saw it again in 2020. People decide that they just don't want to get out and vote, and then they cry about the country being lost. And I don't really understand that. And people say, well, it's no way to win now, so I'm not even going to vote. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, what do you say? It's the this. I've said this just so many times, but it just needs to be said. These people never sleep. This is what they do all the time, and they are serious about it, and we're not serious about it. I can't tell you how many times I've watched people just say, well, I ended up not voting because I disagreed with them on this one issue. Well, what about the other 30 issues? Well, I agreed with them on those, but I disagreed with them on this one. So now we get a guy who you disagree with on all 30 issues, and now we're going to say that well, the country's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, the electoral system is screwed up, but it's not so screwed up that it's not possible to win. I don't know how many states are tainted by all of this, but we still vote by state. They haven't been able to eliminate that just yet. So let's say you give them, the states where the let's say you give them the 5 states where the cheating was so evident in 2020. You can still win the presidency. I guess it's going to take, I don't know. I thought by 2022, I thought Californians would have had enough of this, but no, apparently not. When I say Californians, by the way, I mean those people that live in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and to some degree San Diego. I guess it just doesn't hurt enough yet. So all of this so long Republic thing is self-defeating stuff, and I don't believe it's true that the country's irretrievably lost. I just don't believe it. I do believe that we have some serious. Thank you very much for that epic guess, super chat. I think we have very serious problems, and if it weren't for God and reality being on our side, I'd say probably time to go home. But they are on our side, and those are powerful allies. Truth as well. So, as far as what I think about 2024, my most hopeful indicator on this, in terms, I'm not even talking so much about a Republican victory so much as a Democratic defeat. The pushback against the woke agenda seems to be real, and it seems to be widespread. The Bud Light thing, the Target thing. Target lost $12 billion in 3 days. And that's telling me that conservative voters may have finally reached the point where they've had enough, and they're going to get out and vote for people, even people they have, problems for on certain issues. And if they don't, then things will continue to deteriorate until people get hurt to the point where they start voting these clowns out of office. If the country was not so unbelievably well constructed, then we would have been lost a long time ago. But when I look at what's going on out there, what I see is a constant and significant erosion around the outside edges of and water damage and all the rest of it. But the foundation is so unbelievably well constructed that we've been able to take this kind of damage that we've been taking for 50 years now, and we're still here. We're still here. And so people are saying, oh, well, a revolution. I had this thought yesterday when I was thinking about my maybe it was Tuesday. I was thinking about the right angles that I did this week, and I just talking this week about my shows, how revolutions always eat their own. That all of these wokesters that are trying to cancel other people eventually all get canceled in the end. Eventually, every one of them will make a mistake that will have them become unpersoned, and then they'll be put up against, at least right now, the metaphorical wall, and they'll have themselves canceled, and they'll be completely shocked. Like as I mentioned on the Right Angle show, I heard Mark Dice talking about this for the head of DEI at Uber. She called a meeting for the and I'll get to this. This does, in fact, impact your question there for the 2024 election. She called a meeting saying, hey, from now on, we can't. I don't want anybody using the word Karen in the workplace because it's a pejorative against white women. This is the DEI senior vice president, um, who 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 basically said, you know, let's not be calling me a name, and other white radical feminist names. And all of the minority grievance groups that they have created through their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs lashed out at her, and she was either fired or suspended. Now, that's got nothing to do with the vote, but the Target ban and the Bud Light ban are real, and I don't know how much. I don't know how motivating that is going to be. The elections go to the side that shows up, and just to give you an example, if you think that if you think the electoral system is irretrievably corrupt, that there's no chance to win a national election again. Sorry, I'm just checking something. Come on. There it is. Hang on a second. Okay, so when I'm talking about the fact that we're still voting by state and it's still possible to win national elections, I have a high level of confidence that the voting results in the state of Florida will be accurate and fair and timely. And so those 29 electoral votes are going to count. I have confidence that whatever California has 52, 54, it'll be 13 in another decade. But I have complete confidence that those things will not be reliably reported, although to be fair, even if they were, I think California's going to vote Democratic no matter who's in or not even in the office. These are people vote for a blank chair. And then you have the swing states. And the way you undo the damage is you just reverse the process of the way the damage was done. There was a concerted push to go after the secretaries of state and the attorneys general of the states. You can have said this so many times, it just is something really essential to understand. It doesn't matter how much evidence you have if the prosecution is so partisan that it decides not to press charges. It doesn't matter how much evidence is on Hunter Biden's laptop if the attorney general refuses to prosecute the case. So you have to go back and undo. Ideally, you have to either walk the. I don't know if I can really tell you whether you need to walk the process backward or whether you need to start where they started, but the big fights are things like attorney general and Department of State for your state. Those are the people that control the voting for that particular state. I heard parent that just tangentially somewhere that some state had decided that they were going to that passed a law or a resolution anyway that there was not going to be any more electronic voting or something like that in there. Yeah, Faith Walker points out that Soros didn't go just like things like just been like this acid, this corrosion. Termites is the better example. They've just been down there chewing away at the foundations, and we're just sitting here, just skipping around and having a great time, and going out to the gun range and and complaining about shaking our fists at clouds. And they just keep on working. Now, turns out the house is overbuilt. That's good. So the word I'm going with now from this point forward, at least for the foreseeable future, is restoration. To me, that's the word I'm looking for where my mindset is and where I think probably the country's should be. Restoration. This needs to be said again and again and again. You can take a car that is essentially a rusted out hull, been in a barn for 80 years, and with a lot of tender loving care and some time, you can return that car to the condition It looked like it was made yesterday or this morning. And not only that, you can add safety features that weren't in it originally. Put a nice radio in it if you so desire. And so whenever I see restoration of airplanes or cars, especially when they're just essentially just corroded skeletons, this gives me hope. I think the same thing is true for politics. I think the same thing works for the country. I really do. I think it's just a question of we need to get serious about it, and not only get serious about it. The reason that these restorations work is because people believe in the project, and they donate their time and money and effort in order to achieve a goal, and no one's even voiced the goal. At this point, before it gets too much later, I'm going to stop for a moment and offer my extraordinary thanks for Faith Walker with a $100 super chat. Bill, you're a true beacon of inspiration and joy in a world that can sometimes feel dark and backwards. May God bless you abundantly for the light you bring. Faith, thank you very, very much. That was exceedingly kind. And then Rob RAS for another $100 super chat said, ditto, Faith Walker, and that kind of thing is just blows my mind. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, look, it doesn't matter how badly, look, when you restore an airplane that's been like Glacier Girl, I've shown pictures of this before. I'm going to find one just for the heck of it. So Glacier Girl was a P-38 that was ditched either during the war or shortly after, I guess, and it was ditched in the north, and it got covered up by ice for 70 years, something. And you really do need to see the pictures, because if you don't get the pictures, then none of this makes sense. So give me a moment. All right. Whoops. Wow. So here are a couple pictures showing you the state of the P-38 that was ditched and covered up by ice for 70 years. I've got 4 of them here. So this is what Glacier Girl looked like when the people that love airplanes found it. People who really love airplanes and understand that they're not making any new P-38s. This is what they found when they went looking. Oh, for God's sake, please. There we go. You can barely tell what that is. That's the nose of a P-38. You can see the cannons there. You have twin engines on either side, but that's not a, that's just a, I don't even know what you call that. Here's another one. Presumably. Of course not. Hang on. It's worth it. It's worth seeing these things, so just give me a second here. Let's try this again. Boy. Come on. I don't know why. There's just no explaining. There's no explaining this. Okay. In any event, it is just plain skeletal remains that you can barely recognize as a P-38. You at least got to see that one picture there. So that's what the condition that Glacier Girl was in. I'll bring that up again one more time, although I don't know if this one will scale. You tell me what happened between this time and last time. I can't answer that question. All I know is this is what, yeah, okay, so I was able to scale it before. Now I can't scale it. What did I do between now and then? Nothing. I did nothing. But here's what it looks like today. And this is the point, actually. Wow. So this is the same thing that they pulled out of the ice. I want to be clear about this. This is what was recovered from the ice after a significant amount, a really enormous amount of dedication and love and care and craftsmanship and hard work and money and all the rest of it. Sure would be nice. No, of course not. There's no way we could possibly scale that. That's just asking too much. Yeah, okay, sure, why not? Anyway, it'd be nice if it was big enough for you to see. I'd love for that to be a thing. How about this? Come on. I'm just gonna stay here, and I'm just gonna keep working until I get this damn image into the computer the way I want to. Okay, you don't want to do it that way, that's fine. I did it a second ago that way, but we're not gonna argue. We're just gonna do this. Well, that one's bigger. It won't scale, but that's what it looks like today. And that airplane is the same exact airplane that was underneath the ice, and that's what it looks like today. That aircraft looks like it was made in the factory, which I think was probably Burbank, California. Looks like it rolled out this morning. Looks like this is the first test of the thing with its new paint. And I keep coming back to this because this gives me comfort, actually. One of the few things that does give me comfort. That aircraft is Glacier Girl, and at the same time, it's not Glacier Girl, and this is an important thing to understand. Really get down to it. What is Glacier Girl as a specific example? What is that thing? Okay, because the picture of the one that's flying, is that Glacier Girl? Well, I don't know if any of the components that they dragged out of the ice was in that. I just know that they started with the thing that was in the ice, and then bit by bit they built it up and essentially made a new airplane off of the existing frame. So you had a section that was damaged, you replace it with a new section, then you go to another section that was damaged, you replace that with the new section. So is it Glacier Girl or isn't it? Yes, it is, but it's also not. It's most of what you just saw in that picture, virtually all. In fact, I'd be willing to bet you all of it. Clearly, of that aluminum skin, none of that aluminum skin was under the ice, right? That was added later in precise imitation of what the actual skin would have shown you. So where I'm going with all this is just to say this. Glacier Girl is a blueprint. It's a design. It's not, you cannot actually pin it down and say, is it Glacier Girl? Is it not Glacier Girl? It's both and it's neither. But the point I'm trying to make here is the design is intact. And when they pulled the P-38 out of the ice, they didn't have to they didn't have to try to reconstruct what this thing was. They knew what it was, and they had blueprints too. They knew what the thing is supposed to look like. And then in some weird combination of it being both Glacier Girl and not Glacier Girl, they rebuilt the airplane. There you go, Tim Morris, USA for the win. He's got it exactly. Perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself. Glacier Girl is an idea. It's an idea. It's a concept. It's a vision, right? And so what really matters is that there was a P-38 that went down. Wasn't named Glacier Girl before it went in, obviously. A P-38 went down, ditched, was buried under ice for 70 years, and now it's flying again, and it looks brand new. That's Glacier Girl. And during the entire restoration process, there was no moment when it became something else. It all happened so incrementally that the idea, as Tim said, the idea remained constant. Now, all of that to say this: we've got the design, and we've got I don't want to go quite this far, but I'll just say it anyway. We've got the design, we've got the blueprints, and we've got the wreckage of what this country is supposed to be. We know what the country's supposed to look like in the same way we know what a P-38 is supposed to look like. We've got what's left of the original structure intact. That is what we have to save and restore. And if it turns out you have to replace everything in the structure of this country with an exact duplicate of what was designed in the Constitution, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not it's academic. Glacier Girl now is a flying P-38 Lightning. And if it turns out that we have to rebuild everything, as long as we rebuild it according to plan and don't try and do it all at once, if we just basically, so we're going to repair this, we're going to repair this, going to repair this, going to repair this. If you do that, then that's how a restoration works. I know that when I've seen restorations of cars, same thing. I guess I don't have to keep hammering this point, but just for the heck of it, you get somebody who's got a Model T or something who's been in a barn for 70, 80 years, and they bring it out and they take the frame, the metal frame, and they get all the corrosion off of it, and they sand it down and they do all that other stuff. They powder coat it or whatever. So that frame is still the same frame, but the tires are just chalk, right? They're just nothing. So they replace the tires with new tires. They're the same size tires, and they're correct for the Model T, but they're not the original tire. Then again, the original Model T probably changed. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It just, all that is needed is the existing structure, damaged as damaged as it may be, the blueprints for what it used to be so we know how to rebuild it, and most importantly, it needs an enormous amount of dedication, love, hard work, money, toil, persistence, optimism, faith, all of those things. And if you put those things together, you get the country back. You don't just get the country back, you get the country back better than it was before it started falling apart. You get it back better. You could take, I have a high level of suspicion that flying Glacier Girl that we just saw, that flying P-38, I have a high level of suspicion that inside that cockpit there is at least one form of GPS navigation. I'm sure they made a major effort to get the panel exactly restored too, but I'm telling you, if there's not a GPS in there somewhere, I will be quite shocked. And so you not only get to build it, you get to build it and improve on it, but it takes the commitment. It takes the commitment. So, I guess, Joe, that's all I can tell you right now. I don't know what's going to happen in 2024. I thought I knew what was going to happen in 2022, but I was just dead wrong about that. There are a couple things I do know, and I don't know how they're going to affect the election. One thing I know is that what they're doing now cannot continue. That just can't. The cities are falling apart so rapidly that even a progressive has to be able to see it. And this pushback against this trans offensive is real. That pushback is real. And since the heart of the country is pushing back against this agenda, that means that the people pushing the agenda are fighting back twice as hard, doubling down. That's good. That's good. So again, here's what a restoration looks like in practical terms. Swen Nasarima Will, I hope I got that right, says, we will lose unless we clean up the voter rolls. Correct. So part of the restoration process is not just cleaning up the voter rolls. Part of the restoration process, before you can clean up the voter rolls, the part of the restoration is you've got to get control, political control of whoever whatever state mechanism cleans up the voter rolls. And we keep coming back to the only thing that is convincing me that this is possible, and that's Florida, which was a laughingstock in the 2000 election, and now is probably the best run state in the union. And because it is so well run, the governor was reelected with a 30-point margin. That's unheard of. Unheard of. So what I'm saying is, in 2024, they can cheat their way out of 59 states and all the rest of the electoral votes, but Florida, I'm not saying Florida go Republican, but I am telling you that Florida will get you accurate voting results within a very short time after the elections close, as they've done for the last several cycles. Because in 2000, after that ongoing nightmare, they decided we're not going to make ourselves into fools like that again. So I personally think that no matter what happens, or who the candidate is, I've got a strong feeling, obviously if it's DeSantis, but if it's not DeSantis, if it's Trump, I think Florida's going Republican in 2024. I'm not trying to dodge your question, Joe. I'm just trying to frame it in a way so that you understand what I'm trying to get at here. I know Florida is going to go Republican, and I know that those votes will not be tampered with, because it wasn't just Ron DeSantis coming in. It was the Republican Party in Florida just somehow, I guess it's just quantum probability, Presumably, this coffee mug can float up into the air if all the particles decide to move at the same time in that direction. But in any event, somehow, through some miracle, Florida did it from the ground up. It did it from the ground up. Is it true that I don't think there's a national representative? Is that right? Are there any? There must be, with all the districts. In any event, Florida is solidly Republican, and this is a self-reinforcing strategy. Not only is it solidly Republican, which means it's being well run. And when it's being well run, that means people are going to want to either move there or to continue the upward path. So there it is. There stands Florida, of all places. I'm really quite surprised. But there it is. And it's not just Florida. How many states can we be sure of in the country right now, right? I think you could take the 5 that happened in 2020 and just put them all in the lucky if you get one category, because those things they got away with. And I don't know what the numbers look like in terms of the Electoral College. However, I do know that we can pretty solidly count on Florida, and I'm pretty sure we can count on Montana and Wyoming. Got a good feeling about Alabama. Got a good feeling about... So how many states do we have where the election process still works? Okay, so if it turns out we lose in 2024, what do? The first thing we do is we make sure we don't take any more damage. In other words, whatever states are still using a working, fair, accurate, honest electoral system, make sure we don't lose any more of those. And then we start working on restoration. We start working on it one state at a time if we have to. Don't have to make it one state at a time. It'd be nice to get Arizona back. It'd be nice to get Nevada back. But in order to restore this thing, it's possible. Is there a state called Texas? Yes, I'm pretty solidly sure that Texas is going to be there too. So if you look at Arizona as this corroded out thing, and you take this analogy of the restoration, then Arizona will either be restored or not restored, depending on whether or not the conservatives and Republicans in Arizona are willing to put the effort, the money, the time, the love, the dedication, the faith, and all the rest of it into restoring Arizona. And if they're not willing to do it, then it's going to stay under the ice. That's it. Entropy is on their side. It's always on their side. Everything rusts, everything corrodes, rust never sleeps, the grass keeps growing. All they have to do is sit and let it go. The Democrats, the progressives, they just have to let entropy pull everything down. That's the way gravity's working. We got to lift things uphill. They get to just sit there and float downhill. That's a big advantage for them, but we still have the truth on our side. So whatever it takes to restore Arizona, as an example, will happen or not happen, depending on whether or not we care enough. Now, in terms of how do you make all of this stuff happen, one thing that they do, as I say, they've got entropy on their side. One of the things that entropy is helping them with is they have managed to uneducate two generations, not just fail to educate, I mean uneducate them. Whatever knowledge these kids had has been disassembled and new garbage is put in their head. If people were buying the new garbage, I'd say okay, but nobody's laughing on that side. That side's not having any fun. They're not happy people where their policies are in place. The things just go to hell, right? That's an objective truth. So, when will the pain exceed the ideology? I'm hoping it'll happen in 2024. And I'll tell you this, if it does, and I think there's a good chance of it, I really do. If it does, the first thing that President Trump or whoever should do, the first thing is break up the tech companies. You have to do that before you start working on the electoral system. Because if you control the flow of information, then your efforts to restore the electoral system to integrity are going to fail because the people of that particular state are not going to hear the message. Go after the second you get that thing is sworn in. I mean, honest to God, if it were me, I would give my inaugural address, and on the podium would be the pages of my speech, and shortly after that, in fact, not even shortly after, on top of it, here's my speech, all these little pages right there, and on top of that is the bill to break up big tech. And I take the oath, I'm sworn in, congratulations, Mr. President, I signed this bill to break up big tech, and then I give my inauguration speech. That's how important it is, and that's what I would do. And these people fear that greatly, and I think that's the only way to start. If you cannot control the message, then you can't fix the border, you can't fix defense, you can't fix the electoral system, you can't fix the COVID thing, you can't fix anything. You've got to go where the control of information is, and that nexus is in Cupertino, and the legal framework for breaking them up is not only in place, it's been in place for a long time. The justification for breaking these companies up is overwhelming, and I'm a private business, get the government out of affairs kind of guy. These people are not carriers. They're publishers. They are making editorial decisions, and therefore, I'm going to break them up because they don't get the protection of a carrier anymore. Cody Fett for $10. Need to hit the early night. Just wanted to say before sleep that I know someone from Arizona, and he's always talking about the fight to fix it. It's slow but steady progress towards victory. That's what Florida did. Thank you for that, Cody. Slow but steady progress. In fact, that's actually a significant source of a lot of our problems because it's just so much easier. You know? It's so much easier than pulling that airplane apart rivet by rivet and polishing everything, getting all the grime off and treating the corrosion and deciding which parts can stay and which parts. That's hard work, takes a long time. That's what you have to do to get in on the state level and rebuild confidence in the electoral system. It's long, tedious, long work. And that's why if you're not prepared to really love, if it's not something you wake up and look forward to that day, then it won't happen. But they don't make P-38s anymore. Just can't go out and buy a new one. And the same thing applies for electoral systems either. You either fix the one that's there, or you just let these people continue on their way. And they just keep doing what they're doing. They don't care. They don't care. They're aristocrats. They want people to be poor. They want the middle class to disappear. What's the point of lording it over the middle class if middle class people have everything that they have as privileged? His Royal Highness Gavin Newsom. What does Gavin Newsom have that I don't have? I'm a middle class person. What does Gavin Newsom have that I don't have? He's got a bigger house than I do, but I've got electricity. He's got electricity. He's got air conditioning. I've got air conditioning. I have a car I like. He's got a car he likes. I get to fly on airplanes. He gets to fly on airplanes. Where's the ruling aspect of that? How does he get to lord it over people in the way that aristocrats have always wanted to? How does he do it? Well, he doesn't do it. He can't do it. Because middle class means that there is essentially no dividing line between the rich and the poor, or between the middle class and the rich, or between the middle class and the poor. It's the middle class is the invention that has created freedom. You can't have freedom without the middle class, which is why they're making California unlivable for people in the middle. It took me 15 years to figure out this simple fact. How can they not see this? How can they not see it? Of course they see it, Bill, you idiot. Of course they see it. Of course they understand their tax base is eroding. Of course they understand the hardworking, productive people are leaving the state. Of course they understand that. That's the goal. That's the objective. That's not something that they have to wake up to. This hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, yes, of course we want these businesses to leave. Of course we want the state to get poorer and poorer and poorer. Of course half of all of the homeless people in the country live in California. We'd like to make it 90% if we could, because then life becomes intolerable for the middle class. The middle class leaves. We're still here with our big money. We get to live in mansions, and everybody else can be our gardener. And that's how it works. And eventually, if we get our way, we'll tell them, because of the climate, Earth's about to die any second now. So you all eat bugs. We'll eat steak. You eat bugs. We'll fly our private jets. You guys walk or maybe take a bus or a train. We'll take our jets. Now you're back to the order that they want. They're the lords, and you're the serfs. And that's what they desire. That's what all of this internationalism is all about. It's what the World Economic Forum is all about. All of it. It's all about aristocracy. It's about autocracy. It's about rule. And our problem is, since we don't want to tell other people what to do, we generally mind our own business and leave other people alone. And that's how they've gotten as far as they've gotten. We just sat there, and they didn't. They didn't just sit there. We just said, hey, I want nothing to do with politics. Okay, well, politics is going to have something to do with you. And that's why politics is in everything. That's why Target has a Pride Month display and had Satanistic t-shirts. Because we just plain walked away and they didn't. So we better decide to get back on this boat and back in this fight, and we will. I'm utterly convinced that we will win this fight. I just don't know how long it's going to take. I really don't. The reason I believe we will win in the end is because, again, if people liked new Star Trek, if people liked new Disney, if Little Mermaid was an out-of-the-park smash hit, if Indiana Jones 5 was the largest grossing movie of all time, if people wanted this stuff, then we would be done. But they don't, so we're not. And that's what you have to hang on to. You have to hang on to. Eric Blake is excited because his question is next. Let me go ahead and take that. And something else I was going to talk about. I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, here we go. Two of them. I should probably do both of them. I think. Let me see how many we got here. We go to page 2. We don't. My strategy is working. All right, so here we go. Eric Blake. Bill is a Florida voter from the moment I achieved voting age. I am absolutely disgusted that our governor, whom I eagerly voted for both times, is now using his very recent re-election as little more than a stepping stone to the White House. He's listened to the electability siren song from the GOP establishment, and I'm very disappointed in him. And before anyone else claims otherwise, I would have said this if Trump were currently enjoying his second term. Ron's moment isn't now any more than the 76 election was Reagan's. It's not his time, period. Now, that aside, let's be honest, Bill, isn't Ron announcing his campaign before the Disney lawsuit concludes? The epitome of counting chickens before they're hatched. For all the talk about DeSantis having the good qualities of Trump and none of the bad, he sure seems to have the Don's hubris. God forbid Ron loses that lawsuit and therefore looks like he jumped the gun, which, as far as I'm concerned as a Florida voter, he did. Well, Eric's been saying from as long as I can remember hearing the name Ron DeSantis, he's our governor and you can't have him. Okay. All right. Well, Florida's not the problem. And the thing about Ron DeSantis is he seems to have walked in and fixed the problem. He seems to have the ability to work with the system and fix the problem rather than just bull in a china shop, smash everything and get everybody, lathered up. My observation in general is that the progressives hate DeSantis, but they hate his policies. They don't have a visceral hatred for him. They hate him because he introduces his policy. I'm not saying they don't hate him. They hate him, but it's not like it is with Trump, where it's the guy. It's the guy that's just got to go. They just don't like what DeSantis is doing. It's hard to hate DeSantis because DeSantis doesn't make the kind of statements and remarks that Donald Trump makes all the time. So I don't know. I don't know. All I know is he is so far doing the heavy lifting in terms of restoring the country state by state. Texas appears to have been sitting on its laurels a little bit, but Texas is not in any danger, not that I'm aware of anyway. And all of this comes down to what people want. What do they want to do? Who do they want to vote for? And if we can't put a message together, then we're not only not going to win, we don't deserve to win. We really just don't. If you can't even say what it is you're about, I'm not talking about me or you. Everybody in the comment section here knows exactly what we're about. But if the Republican Party can't elucidate a one-sentence distillation of what we represent, then how the hell are you going to sell something you don't even have it in a box yet? You don't even know what to call it. You haven't even made it yet. You don't even know what it is. So that's where the problem is, and that's why we just keep banging our head against the wall here, trying to see how we can counter $40 billion or 43 from George Soros alone. There's probably $100,000 million on the table. Certainly that much if you throw in what China and Russia are doing. And against that, there's guys like me and JD and Mark Dice and the whole Daily Wire crowd and all the rest of it. So the only question really is, do you walk away? That's when you lose. When you walk away, when you say it's over, then it's over. As long as you're coming back for the fight, it ain't over till it's over. And it's just kind of a question of the clock now. I know that the people who are fighting so hard for this new world order on behalf of their insect overlords are not going to like the world order when they get it. That's why they have to get it as quickly as possible. As far as the question goes, whether DeSantis has made a misstep or anything, I don't know, and I don't particularly care. I don't expect people to be perfect. Yeah, thank you, Phil. I said the Democrats have a brand. They vote for Fetterman because they know that whoever is going to be the senator from Pennsylvania, it's not going to be Fetterman. He can't finish a sentence, but they know that the brand is there. They know that the policies that are going to come out of his Senate seat are going to be the policies that they want. Same thing for Feinstein. She's not here either, and neither is Pelosi. And let's not forget, of course, the President of the United States or the Vice President of the United States. All of the names I mentioned together don't have 120 IQ points spread in aggregate. But that doesn't matter to them because it's not about them. It's about the brand. And this is where they're succeeding, where we're failing, because we're not making it about the brand. We're making it about the salesman. We're making it about Trump. It shouldn't be about Trump. It should be about the message. It should be about the message of what the country is. Donald Trump won in 2016 for one very simple reason, and that is a red hat that says "Make America Great Again." Period. That's why Donald Trump won in 2016. The hat. Simple. Absolutely clear. Everybody knew what it meant. You didn't have to have it explained to you, right? That was a rallying cry. The MAGA hat was genius. That's why he won. And And that kind of clarity is the kind of clarity we need, you know? They don't the Democrats can't sell anything. They've got the message, they've got the product, they've got the brand, they've got the distribution network. But build back better. Is anybody talking about build back better? Has anybody ever listened to Joe Biden and go, wow, I hadn't thought about that before, Joe. I've changed my mind because of you. Has anybody ever listened to Kamala Harris speak and say, you know, I couldn't decide if I was a Republican or Democrat, but now that I've heard the vice president, I'm definitely voting Democrat. Has that ever happened? Ever? No, never, 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 never. We just plain have to get that message simple, clear. Make America great again. Make America free again. That might not be a Maffa hat. I think I would rather go with a Maffa hat. And I think on reflection, if I was going to really play the deep game, I think if I was Donald Trump, I would unveil the Maffa hat as Make America Free Again, and this time I would make the hat blue. That's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. I'd make it blue. I'd make it a blue hat. Make America Free Again. Blue. Everybody knew what the red hat meant. Everybody knew what the MAGA hat meant. Red, MAGA, Make America Great Again, Republicans, conservatives, right-wingers. Okay? I'd make the hat blue. I'd go with blue. Make America Free Again. I'd wear a blue hat. I'd just put it in their face. I'd just own them. I'd walk over to where they are, and I'd just start peeing on their campfire. That's what I would do. And that's what I would do. I would just simply say, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Blue's our color. Well, no, it's our color too. Actually, red, white, and blue are all our colors. Not yours, because you hate the country. Our colors, red, white, and blue. We're not giving up blue. Blue's ours too. Screw you. Maffa. Make America Free Again. And there you go. Just make it blue. That's our color. No, it was your color. It's our color now, too. Can you have red? No, you can't have red. We have red. We have blue. We also have white. You can have any other color you want. In fact, I encourage you. You can have any color you want. You can have all the pinks and the purples. You can have all the browns, all earth tones. All those things are yours. Are fantastic. Knock yourselves out. But the red, the white, and the blue all belong to us, not just the red. So you can't stop us from making a blue hat. So we're going to make a blue hat. Somebody's going to market this, and they're going to make $1 billion trillion, and I'm going to sit there and go, wow, I wish I hadn't said that out loud. But that's not my job. My job is to say things out loud. So there you go. I'm going to interrupt this programming for a minute to talk about something that I wanted to get to in the beginning, because 2 days ago, I had a phone call. Some of you, I haven't promoted it very much, but over the course of the last several years, not only have I done work for Daily Wire, I've also done a number. I think I've done three shoots. I don't know how many episodes that turned out. I think I did three episodes, 3 times. So 9. I think I did 9 episodes of a show called American Made for Fox Business, and they had me come in and talk about the Saturn V or the 747 or the Sherman tank, which I didn't know nearly enough about until 2 days before I went down there, and had a pretty good idea of what tanks do and all the rest of it. So they asked me to do a 4th one, but this one's different. On the 12th, the 12th. On the 12th of June, I am going to a studio. Instead of shooting another episode of that, I am going to be there as one of a few people who are going to represent Team Freedom on the moon landing debate. It's not just me, but I'm fairly convinced that I'm going to have the lion's share of the time when I'm finished with this. The plan is for the host, who I'm not familiar with, but you will probably know him. It's not Jimmy Fallon, it's Fallion. It's a comedian, and the producer of the show told me that the basic spin is that Jimmy's going to be a conspiracy guy. Jimmy is going to be a guy who does not believe the moon landing happened. That's how we're going to play the show. I said, hooray, hooray. Now, that realization that I was going to be, batting for the home team, got me to do something that I had kind of wanted to do and never did. I spent about 2 hours yesterday, I want to say. 2.5 hours. I got numbers on things that I knew was true. I want to go in there ammoed up. So when I hear the objections to why the moon landing happened, I've known how to deal with those arguments, but what I didn't have was numbers. And it's funny what numbers will do. Because if you have numbers, then you can win. So I just wanted to share with you some of the numbers that I got in from a couple days ago. From Kisama001, thank you, $5 super chat. Hey Bill, I just watched What Is a Woman? Sadly, Elon is trying to appease both sides and failing by restricting its reach. It was brilliant. It is brilliant. It's brilliant, brilliant work. Matt Walsh, if he never does anything else, and he will, what he's done with that topic and with that movie is magnificent. All right, so this will be free. Will this be available? Yes, this is going to be on Fox Business, I believe. I'll let you know because this one I'm going to link to. But here's some information, some numbers that I hope will astound you because it certainly astounded me. So I took notes. I took a significant number of notes. Yeah, it's hard to see all of them. I took a lot of notes. So here we go. You'll get a kick out of this. So let's deal with a couple of these so-called proof that the lunar landing didn't happen. To my utter amazement, the one that seems to be most popular, or one of the most popular, is there's no stars visible from the surface of the moon. My first response to that will be, oh, God, how could we go to all that trouble to fake the moon landing and forget to put stars up there? What were we thinking? Boy, I sure feel like an idiot now. The whole thing is given away. We forgot to put the stars up there, you idiots. God, we're in space, you know. Somebody's going to get fired over this. Okay, so why can't you see stars from the surface of the moon? Well, the answer I would have gone with in the past is that it's too bright. And that's the correct answer. But what I didn't know was, I didn't know how too bright it was. If you know the answer, please do not chip in. I'm not trying to trap anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody look stupid. I would just like a little feedback. So if you don't know the answer, give us your best guess in either one of the two streams. Here's the first question. How much brighter is sunlight than moonlight? And by moonlight, I mean full moon directly overhead on a clear night. The brightest moonlight it is possible to have, the brightest moonlight that can possibly exist, how much brighter is sunlight than moonlight? I'll allow a few moments for people to tick in their answers. I wish I had the Jeopardy theme. So far, we're getting 42 times from Beefire. We're getting 10,000 times. Wow, from Lord Bios. CP Tome says daylight's 42 times brighter. Brooks says 88 times brighter. Eric Blake says it's 42 times brighter. 25 times brighter from Jim Patrick. I'll let another 10 seconds go by, and then I will close magnitudes. I'm not going to deal with magnitudes. 1,000 times brighter, 1,000 times brighter, 100 times brighter. Okay, thank you. 246 times brighter, 500 times brighter. Here is your answer. Sunlight is 380,000 times brighter than moonlight. 380,000 times brighter. How can that be? Well, it can be because when your eyes are in daylight, not only do your irises constrict, but the chemistry on the back of your retina changes. your eyes actually go into like a kind of a low, they kind of go into like a low response mode. The chemistry in your eye changes according to the available light. Sunlight is 380,000 times brighter than moonlight. Nobody gets even close to that. And when you realize that if you're standing on the moon and the surface of the moon is being lit by something that is 380,000 times brighter than moonlight is, all of a sudden this thing starts to make a little bit more sense. But I'm not done yet. Here's another question for you. How much brighter do you think, now I'm not talking about moonlight on the ground, I'm saying if you look up at a full moon in the night sky, directly overhead, as bright as the moon gets, how much brighter is the moon compared to Sirius, the brightest star in the sky? How much brighter is a full moon than Sirius? And again, we'll allow just a few moments here. Looking up at the sky, there's the moon. How much brighter is it than the brightest star in the sky? Bum, 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 1.8 million, 15 million. No, I think people are going in the other direction now. 1,000 times? No. So I'm not going to let this one go. It's more than 7, yes. 380,000 times brighter? No. So sunlight on the ground is 380,000 times brighter than moonlight. The moon is 27,000 times brighter than the brightest star. 27,000 times brighter than the brightest star. So by now, you should be beginning to realize that there is an awful lot more distance between daylight and nighttime than you would ever suspect to be true. Now we get to have a little bit of fun. So if your eyes have to make an adjustment for 400,000 times the brightness, then all of a sudden, it's not so miraculous why you can't see the stars because of the intensity of what sunlight really is. Here's a question for the people that I came up all on my own on, and I've never heard anybody actually answer this. How come you can't see stars on the moon? Why can't you see stars during the moon landing? Why is that? Well, I would ask you, why can't you see stars in the daytime? They don't go away, you know. Why don't you see stars in the daytime? Here on Earth, right now. This is something you can test for your own self, actually. You don't have to go to the moon to figure this one out. You can actually do this one on your own. You can play this one in your home game, kids. Go outside in the daytime and tell me where the stars are. Because atmosphere absorbs the sunlight? No. If the atmosphere were absorbing the light of stars, then we wouldn't be able to see the stars at nighttime. The atmosphere is the same in the daytime and the nighttime, so why can you not see stars during the daytime? Because you're sitting under a light source that is, I think the actual number compared to stars is about 1 trillion times brighter, but you're sitting under a light source that's 380,000 times brighter than the full moon. The reason you can't see the stars in the daytime is your eyes cannot do both of these things at the same time. When the sun goes down, the stars appear to come out, but it's not like they're suddenly lighting up, you know. It's not like somebody's got a dimmer and they're dimming up the stars as it's getting to be dark and it's time to dim. No, those stars are always there. They're always the same brightness. You can't see them in the daytime because it's too bloody bright outside. So if you're asking, how come you can't see the stars from the surface of the moon? That's the same reason why you can't see the stars from the surface of the earth at daytime, you idiots. Period. That's it. It's that simple. It's just not possible. Now, as it turns out, I haven't actually done this with a star, but I've done this with Venus. So Venus is probably, I don't know, a couple times, well, significantly brighter than the brightest star, but it's in the general ballpark. Starlight is 9.5 trillion times dimmer than sunlight. That's what I had always heard. I just want to make sure I got that. So let me just get that number down. It's about 9.5 trillion times. Trillion. I didn't go with that originally because I'd seen that number and I didn't know how it was derived. Okay. So there's why you can't see the stars on the moon. Turns out that those guys actually got it right. Now we get to the one that I've been looking forward to. This is the one that got me starting doing the research because this is the one I really needed actual numbers on in order to make the case. And here's how I'm going to handle this one. The Apollo landings could not have happened. The moon landing is a fake because there's no way that the astronauts could have survived the passage through the Van Allen radiation belts. That's basically the form of the question that's going to come to me. And my response to that will be, well, that's a serious charge. And fortunately, that's a measurable charge. So how much dose would you take going through the Van Allen belts, Mr. TV show host? Well, I don't know. Well, you better know. You're just the one who said it didn't happen because they take a fatal dose. You couldn't survive passage through the Van Allen radiation belts. So, number one, I know. Do you know how much is a fatal dose of radiation? And number two, how much radiation did they actually take when they went through the Van Allen belts? Would they have taken? If they were to go, let's say they didn't go, but let's say you're right. Let's say they faked it because it's impossible to transit the radiation belts. So since that would have killed them, what dose would it have been if they had gone through? You can give it to me in rads or sieverts or probably millisieverts. Up to you. I don't care. Any one of those be fine. Rem, any of them. How much is it? What's the radiation exposure in the Van Allen belts? Oh, no. No, of course you don't know. You don't know, but you've just told me that it's a lethal dose. You don't even know what a lethal dose is, I'd be willing to bet you. But what you surely don't know is you don't know how much radiation a capsule would have taken going through the Van Allen radiation belts. So, this is where I'd actually start the argument. If you're telling me that astronauts cannot survive passage of the Van Allen radiation belts, then you'd better tell me what the radiation dose is of the Van Allen belts. You better tell me what amount of ionizing radiation are the Van Allen belts putting out to make it impossible for living astronauts to go through there. What is it? What's the dose? Well, this one I spent a significant amount of time on. I think you could actually, and I'm not sure if M1A1 is making this point. I never heard it stated quite this clearly, but I did hear enough actual evidence to suggest that it was actually more dangerous for them to be outside the Van Allen belts. The Van Allen belts actually stop more background radiation. But here we go. So unlike these guys who just assert that it was not possible to take, couldn't do it. It killed the astronauts. Okay, well, let's figure that out. First of all, what dose would be necessary to kill a human being? Turns out that this is not an easy question to answer because people react to radiation differently. So the closest answer you can come up with is a dose of 400 rads on the skin, right? Not internally. They take 400 rads of radiation. A human who takes 400 rads of radiation on the skin has a 50% chance of dying within 30 days if they do not get medical attention. 400 rads. 400 rads comes to 4 sieverts or 4,000 millisieverts, 4,000 thousandth of a sievert. Okay? So the lethal dose is either 400 rads equals 4 sieverts equals 4,000 millisieverts. And now for the sake of the argument, we're going to talk in millisieverts. It doesn't matter if you know what a millisievert is. Consider it units. Okay? Units. The lethal dose to get 50% of the people to die without medical care after 30 days is 4,000 millisieverts. 4,000 units. That's what it takes to have a 50% chance of killing an astronaut. So, with 4,000 being the fatal dose, that they put dosimeters on these guys because radiation was in fact a concern for them, and that's why they shielded the command module, and that's why the command module had a lot more shielding than the lunar module. Lunar module had to lift off again, command module didn't. So, here we go. 4,000 millisieverts, 50% of the time will kill you. What did the astronauts take? Well, on Apollo 8, they took 1.6 out of 4,000. On Apollo 10, they took 4.8. On Apollo 11, they took 1.8. Apollo 12, they took 5.8. 13, they took 2.4. 14 was way out of the park. They took 11.4 millisieverts of the 4,000 millisieverts that would kill half of them. Apollo 15 took 3. Apollo 16 took 5.1. Apollo 17 took 5.5. Now, if you take all those numbers and average them together, that means that the average dose was 4.6 millisieverts. The fatal dose for 50% fatality is 4,000. What the average dose for the Apollo astronauts was during the entire trip was 4.5. It is almost precisely 1% of the lethal dose for 50% of the people. The Apollo astronauts took about 1% of what it would have killed them. It would have killed half of them. 1%. Now, let's be fair. If, in the unlikely event, if a solar flare had been directed directly at the Earth while they were on the mission, that would have been a serious problem. That would have been the kind of mission, that would have been the kind of event that would have gotten them in the LEM to the command module and back home as fast as they could, right? That's what it would have done, because when a flare is coming at you, then those numbers go way, way up beyond 4, 10, 15, 12 millisieverts. Then you've got a real problem. But it didn't happen, and so we didn't have to worry about it. They had plans for if it did happen. If it did happen, it's like, let's get the hell out of here and get home. And theoretically, the largest dose imaginable based on the largest solar flare ever recorded in terms of the energy that thing put out, that thing would have put out about 380 rads of the 400 needed to kill you. So if you got one aimed directly at you, you were in some real trouble. Yes, that's right. That's not 1%. That's a tenth of 1%. But those numbers are correct. So 1/10 of 1%. I said it's less than 1%. It is. It's a tenth of 1%. Now, how do we know these numbers? Well, Dr. Van Allen, who discovered the Van Allen radiation belts, was asked about this. And he said that the most intense part of the Van Allen radiation belts are the inner belt. And that the most intense part of the inner belt, there are two belts, inner and outer. The inner one is by far more energetic than the outer one. Dr. Van Allen said if you were to put a space shuttle, meaning a shielded ship, into the heart, the very heart of the most active part of the Van Allen belts, that's about 1,000 miles above the surface of the Earth. If you put men in a spaceship 1,000 miles above the Earth and had them continually orbiting inside the heart of the inner belt, it would take a week for them to get a lethal dose of radiation. It would take a week. The Apollo astronauts transited the inner belt of the Van Allen belts, moving at a speed of 24,000 miles an hour. They crossed through the innermost belt of radiation in 15 minutes. So, just so we're all on the same page, 1 week in the inner belt will get you to 50% mortality. They went through in 15 minutes. And since I was told there'd be no math, I got some of these numbers in advance. 1 week is 10,080 minutes. So you'd have to be in the inner belt core for 10,080 minutes to get a lethal dose of radiation. But the Apollo astronauts were not inside it for 10,080 minutes. They were in it for 15 minutes. And 15 is less than 10,800, or 10,080. It's considerably less, actually. And to cross the entire set of belts, including the outer weaker one, they were only there for 2 hours. So that's 60 minutes. I'm sorry, 120 minutes. And so it is not even close. The largest, and B-Fire's got this, the largest dose that you can get on Earth in terms of a, people say how many chest x-rays? Well, it turns out that over the course of the years, the enormously reduced the amount of x-rays that you have to get an x-ray. So those numbers are actually pretty low. Right now, in terms of medical care, medical radiation dose, intentional dose on the Earth, the most radiation intense thing you can do is a full CT scan, full body CT scan. I've seen somebody come up with a couple different numbers, but basically a full body CT scan is about 1 rad. That's 10 millisieverts, I think. Is that right? I think so. I'll double check that one. But basically, it's about double what the astronauts took. That kind of a full body CT scan is about double what the Apollo astronauts took. Here's one number I did check and recheck again. So the average for the Apollo astronauts in terms of their radiation dose was 4.6 millisieverts. In the course of a year on Earth, just as any single one of us, every single one of us, the amount of radiation we take over a year is about 3 millisieverts. The astronauts took an average of 4.6 in the space of about 10 days. So, in the space of about 10 days, they took about as much radiation as they would take if they'd stayed on Earth for a year and a half. And we don't drop dead from radiation exposure at 3 millisieverts a year. It's so easy to blow this stuff out of the water. This is why I'm going to open with what is the dose? I'm not going to give it to him in advance. I'm going to say, well, okay, you assert that the radiation dose would have killed him. What is the dose? Yeah, 400 rads is 4 sieverts, then 400 rads is 4,000 millisieverts, I would think. Okay, so you can just destroy these people. I'm just going to do all the rest of it too. Oh, these shadows aren't parallel, therefore it can't possibly have been on the moon. Okay, you know when you park a car in a parking lot, you know how the parking lot looks kind of like that. You know how if you were to get in a drone and go directly over the parking lot and look down, those lines would not be converging. They'd all be parallel because this is called parallax. This is what happens. Vanishing point to the horizon, all of that jazz. And when you throw in the distortion available by lenses, if I take up 2 straight lines on a 100 millimeter lens, a 200 millimeter lens, and then I go to a 12 millimeter lens, they're both going to bend. And that's something we can do right now, any day. And then you have to ask questions like, kind of inconvenient for you, that you can shoot a laser at the moon and you get a reflection back at the 6 places where we landed on the moon, and there's a 7th place too. You get 7 laser reflections back. The 7th place is where the Soviets put an unmanned lander. You can get a laser beam returned to you there. We can tell the distance to the moon to about 6 inches at any given time now because of that. So how did those laser reflectors get up there? Exactly where they're supposed to be. And since the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter was able to see the landing sites from its normal orbit, they dropped the orbit of the LRO for, I don't know, about 10 days or something, I think. Took it down to a much lower orbit and then waited until they passed over the landing sites. And now there are images of all of the Apollo landing sites, and you can see the 4 legs on the lunar modules. The descent stage, you can see the tracks of where the astronauts walked. You can see the driving tracks of where they drove. You can see where the flag is in most cases. You can see where the ASLEP, the Apollo Surface Lunar Experiments packages are. It's all right there. It's all precisely where it needs to be. And it's all available publicly through the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Now, obviously, some people are there's nothing you can do to convince them, but nevertheless, just, keep them coming. Keep them coming. We have information. We have a guy who said that, was in charge of NASA. He was a NASA engineer. He said, we faked the whole thing. Really? That's interesting. I have a message from a guy. I got an email from a guy who said that the Kansas City Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl. It was the Eagles that won the Super Bowl. You may think the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl, but that's not true. That's all part of the deception. It was the Philadelphia Eagles that won this last Super Bowl. And how do I know that? I know that because a guy who was there told me that they won. He was on the staff. In fact, I got an email from the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs saying that the Eagles won that game and that the Kansas City Chiefs lost. So why are we still saying that the Chiefs won when the Eagles clearly won? Don't tell me that you and 100 million other people watched it happen live. I have somebody wrote down and told me that didn't happen. I've got a guy on the inside. He sent an email saying, no, the Eagles won the game. So certainly that outweighs the proof of what 200 million people saw live in front of their own eyes, right? I've got a guy who said something, got a guy who wrote down something. He was on the inside. He knew he was a football coach, wrote down that the Eagles won the game. So I guess we'd better rewrite all the history books, right? Because if I've got a guy who said that something happened, that certainly outweighs what 200 million people saw happening in real time. And it certainly outweighs the fact that there were roughly 100,000 people in the stadium while this was going on, and every single one of them were part of the conspiracy to make you believe that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl when actually it was the Eagles. Every single one of them. Everyone. They were all in on it. All of them. The whole thing was a giant scam. The feed that they sent back out live was all done previously in a studio, was done on a football field using the same uniforms 2 weeks earlier, and I can't believe that you sheeple fell for this deception, because I've told you, a guy's already admitted that happened. He's told me that it happened, and there it is. How stupid does that sound to you? Because I was one of the many millions of people who watched every one of those Saturn V launches. I saw Apollo 13 go into the sky. Now, this is where I get to have a little bit of fun. So if the question is, how much is a conspiracy paying me to defend the moon landing here on Fox Business? The answer is the conspiracy is paying me the exact same amount of money that Fox Business is paying me to be here today. That's how much they're paying me. You're both paying me nothing. I'm doing this because I care about the truth. And there you go. And of course, P7 2017 is, this is also, I've just got them all lined up. I'm ready to go. We're racing the Soviets to the moon. When we landed on the moon, the Soviets congratulated us. And all of these Soviet cosmonauts said, well, we were close. We could have, if Korolev hadn't died in 1966, we would have beat the Americans. I don't believe that's true, but let's say it was. The Russians, the Soviets, congratulated us on landing on the moon, which was nice of them. Because if we hadn't landed on the moon, Soviet radars would have shown the Apollo command module still in orbit. And you would think that if anybody was going to say, hey, whoa, what's it doing in orbit around the Earth? They just said they landed on the moon. We've got radar tracks on it in Earth orbit here. You would think that they would be the ones to make the loudest. But of course, that means that the Soviets were in on it too, you see. The conspiracy to fool the Soviets that we landed on the moon, the Soviets were also complicit in that conspiracy, because they didn't release the fact that we never went to the moon. They just agreed that we did it. So not only was it us, with hundreds of thousands of people involved to fool the Soviets were part of the conspiracy too. Them agreeing that we went to the moon was just another super, super, super cool way to make sure that nobody got to the real truth, you see? See how it works? Actually, Dave Big Booty said, didn't Korolev die when their big rocket blew up? I actually thought that too, but no. Korolev died of, well, presumably it said he died of cancer, but a number of people said that he died in a hospital in Moscow because of a botched hemorrhoids operation, which sounds believable to me. There was a major guy who was a big head of the space, one of the heads of the space program, some big general or something, who was insisting that he go sit, that the N1 was so safe that he put a lawn chair out there essentially and watched the launch. And when that thing blew up, killed him and killed, 30 people, 100 people as well. There you go. And then here's the one that this is my knockout punch. Because on the conversation with the producer, he gave me a couple of examples of the kind of things that they're going to ask me. So, okay, if we went to the moon, how come we haven't been since then? Well, turns out there's a couple reasons for that. There's some simple ones, and there's one real important one. So I'll just do the simple ones first. The short answer is, actually, before I answer that question, what's your favorite movie? I'm not going to wait for the delay. I'm going to ask this. What's your favorite movie of all time, ever? Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. Great. How many times did you see it? You see it in the theater? Yeah. How many times did you go back? I saw it 3 times. 3 times. You went to the theater 3 times to see that movie, your favorite movie ever, right? Yeah. And then why didn't you go a 4th time? Well, I've already seen it, and, I've seen it 3 times. Yeah, but why didn't you go a 4th time? Well, I kind of knew what would happen. I knew what was going to happen. Well, see, we went back to the theater 6 times to see the same show. We landed on Apollo 11. We went back and watched it again on Apollo 12. We wanted to see it on 13, but there was another gigantic drama. Then we went back and watched it again for 14, and then we watched it again on 15. Then we watched it again on 16. Then we watched it again on 17. We went to see that movie 6 times in the theaters. We went out and watched it 6 times in the theaters before we got bored. You got bored after 3 showings. We got bored after 6. America is such a remarkable country that half a century ago, it got bored of going to the moon. And that is the simple and not important answer for why we haven't been back. We just got bored with it. We did it. If I'm in a race, if I'm a race car driver and I'm taking risks to come in first, I'm going to take a lot of risks to come in first. But if I'm 3 laps behind when the winner crosses the checkered flag, I'm not going to race as hard after that. It's over. It's over. But the real reason we haven't been back to the moon is one that you're not going to like very much. But I'm going to tell you what it is anyway, because it is the actual reason for why we hadn't been back yet. The reason we haven't been back to the moon since 1972 is because since then, Americans have become much more fearful, much more risk averse, much less independent, much less decisive, but mostly, we've become much, much, much stupider since then. Much, much stupider since then. And now we know why people, especially young people, can't believe that the lunar landing occurred. Because they've been told that they're the smartest kids ever. And they think the moon landing is just the world's biggest. Okay, boomer. You landed on the moon? Okay, boomer. Well, we did land on the moon, Zoomers. And I'm sorry that you can't accept that. I'm sorry that you're not emotionally able to process the fact that your grandfathers were capable of going to the moon, essentially doing the math in their head. I know that's got to bother you. But it's true, and you know it's true, because none of the arguments that you're putting up to say it didn't happen hold any water at all, and you know it. You just want to believe it because of an emotional need that you have. And by the way, it's not your fault that you're much dumber than the people that went to the moon. Much dumber. It's the fault of the people who went to the moon that you're this stupid. You didn't raise yourselves. You didn't design your own educational system. We did that. We allowed that to happen. So that's on us. But nevertheless, there it is. That's what we did. And well, what about computers? You couldn't go to the moon without computers. Why is that? Well, you can't do something that complex without computers. Okay. What about if you're moving through the air at 500 miles an hour and you're in the kind of rain and storms that mean that you can't see anything out the window? Essentially, the windows are painted white. Is it possible to land an airplane without computers when you can't see out the window? No. Well, actually, it is. And we did it for 50, 60 years, maybe 40, certainly 40. 40 years where humans using this computer were able to land an instrument approach in zero visibility. We've been doing that for 40 years or something before we had computers that were doing that. Right? We were able to do that, right? How were we able to land on the moon without having computers? Well, we didn't have powerful computers. Probably the best way to describe the Apollo computers is to say they were programmable calculators. But they were doing the math, and they were giving us altitudes. But the real reason we landed on the moon without computers is because while they didn't have powerful computers on board the lunar module, it did have something to make up for it. It had something that more than made up for the fact that it didn't have powerful computers. What the lunar module had in order to make up for the lack of computers was it had 2 big windows on it. That's why we were able to land it on the moon, because it had 2 big windows on it. And that meant that the professional pilots who had flown simulators, both electronic and practical, who had risked their lives on Earth flying these unstable things were able to look out the window and land on the moon in the same way that I can drive a car without a computer and the same way I can fly an instrument approach without a computer. That's how they did it. That's how they did it. And exactly, Dave Big Booty said we had big, huge mainframes in Houston. It's not like the astronauts had to do those course corrections on their own with a scratch pad or even a slide rule, right? They didn't determine where the correction burns were. The Apollo, the crew of Apollo 11 weren't the ones who were say, we need a 4-second burn with an offset angle of 62 degrees. They didn't say that. The guys on the ground said, hey, you guys need a 4-second burn with an offset angle of 62 degrees because our mainframe computers down here have been working on this problem for the last 3 days. And we've decided, based on your radar information, that you're just slightly off course. So this is what you need to do it. So where's the problem here? Where's the problem? And as far as your side is concerned, how can you see dust behave like water unless you're in a vacuum? And it's harder to make a vacuum the size of a soundstage than it is to go to the moon. And by the way, if this whole thing is a giant conspiracy and a lie, and only now are people smart like you figuring out the real truth, if this is like there were 300,000 people worked on the Apollo program, so every single one of them was in on the conspiracy, every single one of them kept quiet. No one provided any actual evidence. But okay, so if that's the case, then actually my simplest explanation that I would require of you is, why did we go back? If this is the biggest risk in history, if it's the biggest con in history, the largest lie told in history, and it's only through the unbelievable diligence of people like you who've managed to see through the curtain and pierce the reality behind it, then why did we go back? If we claimed that we landed on the moon on Apollo 11 and we did the big cheer and we say we won, then why would we go back? That just multiplies the risk. That's one more time we've got to set the whole thing up in a studio. One more time where there's film that can show like there's a marking on a rock or something. Why would we go back? Why? What's the point? I got a better question for you. Why did we go back 6 times? Actually 7, but 6 got there. And I got an even bigger question for you, much bigger question for you. When I watched Neil Armstrong land on the moon, you know what I did not say to myself when I watched him walking around? I never, during that Apollo 11 moonwalk, did I ever say, I wish there was a car there. I never said that. I didn't miss the lunar rover when it wasn't there, right? It's not like they needed the car, the rover. They didn't need the rover in order to do the Apollo 11 landing, and so I didn't miss it. But then the question I have to ask you is, if they built all this stuff in a giant studio, then why the hell did you put a car on 3 of these missions and drive it at 20 miles an hour for 40 minutes? Why would you do that? If it's all done on a soundstage, why would you possibly build a soundstage that is literally 10, 15 miles long in order to accommodate a car that you wouldn't have missed if it wasn't there? Why would we possibly, if we're going to do this thing as a fake, why on earth would we put a frickin' car on the final 3 missions and drive over the horizon with it? Why? Why would we do that? Why? I'm waiting. I got all day. Why? Yeah, Tim Morris is exactly right. We sent Stanley Kubrick to the moon to fake the moon. We faked the moon landing footage on the moon. We had to go to the moon to fake the footage landing. And I got all the rest of them. Now we got a guy who said it didn't happen. Well, okay. Well, there's 12 Saturn V launches, I think. The manned ones were there were 3 or 4 or 5 million people in Cape Canaveral watching these launches live. You've seen the footage of them standing there. I was there for one, but I'm obviously part of the conspiracy, even though I was only 10. So they probably just bought me a new baseball glove or something. But are you saying that the Saturn V rockets didn't launch? No, they launched. They just didn't go to the moon. So in order to go to the moon, you need a rocket powerful enough to take you to the moon. And we built one powerful enough to take us to the moon. And 98% of the total power used during the lunar missions just in terms of pounds of thrust, was designed to get us into orbit. So in order to not go to the moon, we had to build a gigantic moon rocket capable of going to the moon. And we had to build 12 of them, right? Right? We had to, because 12 of them launched, or it might have been 13. I should probably get that correct before I know. So why would we do that? Why would we build 12 moon rockets? 12. Wouldn't one be enough? If the whole thing's going to be a lie, why would you risk it 12 times? 12 Saturn V launches, 7 lunar missions, 6 of which actually landed on the moon. Apollo 13 came back because of the hard work and the courage and the intelligence and the improvisation and the guts and the grit and the faith and the unbelievable work ethic brought these guys back from the dead. So what about that? How did that work? And you don't get to say, I don't know. All right? You don't get to keep moving the goalposts every single time. You have a theory, and I have a theory. I provided evidence for my theory. Now you need to provide evidence for your theory. Let me hear your evidence. Were those rockets real or not? And they're done. Right? They're done. Oh, they launched into space, yeah, but they stayed in Earth orbit. They stayed in Earth orbit. Why? So that the Soviets could track them in Earth orbit? How do you get the Soviets on our team if the whole thing was designed to beat the Soviets? If we didn't go to the moon, then all the Soviet Union would have to do is show the radar tracks of Columbia in orbit around the Earth while they're claiming to be landing on the moon, and say, and win the greatest propaganda victory of all time. It's not even dependent on the people in NASA, all 300,000 of them, not one of them to provide any evidence. It's not even necessary to have 300,000 of those people keeping a secret for their entire lives. The Soviets are in on the fraud designed to convince the Soviets that we went up to the moon. You got anything else you want to talk about, dude? Because I got to tell you, this is not real impressive in terms of anything. You not only don't have anything, the stuff you're bringing is so sad that it's actually the best evidence. The best evidence that we went to the moon, in a way, is how weak the arguments against it are. You know? I really think that's it. This is what you got. Fatal dose through the Van Allen radiation belts. You can't tell me what the dose is. I can tell you, but you can't tell me. All shot in a soundstage while we drive around at 20 miles an hour for 45 minutes. 6 times. Soviets on board. No stars in the sky. There's a letter C on a rock. Got a so-called C on it. If that were an engraved letter C, or if it was a letter C that was marked on with a stencil, then you'd have actually some compelling evidence. But you don't have a C that's marked on by a stencil. You got a crack in a rock that is an irregularly shaped approximation of a C. And if you want me to start looking at lunar footage, I will, because I will now go and look at moon footage, and I'll find you L's, I'll find you I's, I'll find you a lot of I's, I'll find you some O's, I'll find you a bunch of other letters and numbers that are on the moon, all part of the styrofoam moon rocks that were put there, you see, because making a C or something that is a general approximation of a C is not terribly hard. Naturally, I mean, you know. Now, if the side of the moon rock had instead of had a C, if it said property of Acme Corporation, then I'd be impressed, because that's extremely unlikely in terms of natural explanations on one frickin' rock, on one frickin' mission. But that's not what you got. You got something that looks kind of like a C. And by the way, if the C was a mistake, that this is rock C, and we had to label the rocks. So we've got a bunch of rocks out there. We've got more rocks than we have letters for, but let's just put that aside because we drove past 40 minutes of these rocks, so we probably got rocks that are 7 Cs and all the rest. Put all that aside for a minute. If we're going to mark a rock with a C, shouldn't that be the part of the rock that's down, right? In other words, it's an error that we're seeing the C, right? That's a mistake that proves we didn't go. Forget about all the rockets that were launched on. You've got a crack in a rock that looks in the approximation of a half of a circle. But if that's what you use to mark the prop, would that be on the flat part on the bottom? In other words, yes, you're saying the thing tipped over, accidentally revealed the C. I'm saying the side of the rock that the C is on is as curved and as normal as the other side of the rocks are. If it's a prop rock, it's going to have a flat bottom. That's what prop rocks have. If I want to show rocks coming up out of the ground on Star Trek, I make something that looks like a rock on the top, and it has a flat bottom, and that sits on the ground. And if I'm going to mark that thing with a C, I'm going to put it on the flat side, which is facing down. And if I tip it over, the C is revealed, but so is the flat side of the prop. Right? Anyone looking through a telescope that can see the flag on the moon will look like Kennedy at Dallas. Yes, exactly. It's just plain. If you have a map of the United States, this big, let's say, and I draw a line from Los Angeles to New York, because of the commercial airline flight. We do agree that those happen, right? You are capable of flying from New York to Los Angeles. That's not part of a cover-up or a conspiracy, or that actually happens. Okay. I just want to check because the standards for this are actually fairly low. If I fly on a map and I draw you a line between New York and Los Angeles, how high is the airplane above the map, do you think? Half an inch? Quarter inch? A couple millimeters? Well, it's inside the paper, right? It's 7 miles high, 2,000 miles wide. It's inside the paper. That's how low it is relative to the map. This is what large objects do when you start realizing how big things are, like the Earth or the Moon, for example. That's why you can't see the flags of the lunar rover on the Moon, because they're very, very small compared to a very big moon. And even if it wasn't a big moon, even if it was a small moon, it's still too small to see without the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter dropping from 30 miles to 15 miles in order to get enough of those legs to prove that the whole thing actually happened. Anyway, that was just a rehearsal. And that's, I just kind of had to get that out of my system. What time is it? Yeah, I'll do a little bit more here. I think we can finish the questions. First time chat from Giancarlo36. Bill, how many years do you think Trump will get? Well, I'm hoping for 4. Giancarlo? I know where you're going with that question, but I'm thinking 4 would be a nice number. And I don't think that he's going to be in prison. I think, Fiery Waco says 4 years of light duty. Exactly. Okay, you want to lock him up? Lock him up. You miserable, low-life fascist bastards. That's okay. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, Eric's second question has got a lot to do with the first question. I think I covered most of that. From Road Rider. Bill, read this in the first person as yourself. Okay, I can do the first person because I am the first person. Mike Rowe and Dr. Thomas Sowell are sitting together in the first class lounge at LAX, just chatting while waiting for their flights. I walk in and Rowe spots me and waves me over to join the conversation. After I check my depends to make sure that I've not wet my pants from the shock of the invite. Actually, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I'd be wondering what took them so long. I come over and sit down. The question, what in the world would I want to ask Dr. Sowell? What would I ask Mike Rowe? These are 2 cultural icons I'm sitting with, a powerhouse from the past in Sowell and a powerhouse from the present in Rowe. I have to make them serious questions. Don't be glib. Maybe my only chance to ask them directly. I know Bill walking into a first-class lounge at LAX at the rate we citizen producers are paying him, total hypothetical, but let's not it's go along with the premise anyway. Bless you, bless you, bless you. You're a fine fellow road rider. Okay, so what questions would I ask Mike Rowe, and what question would I? One question would I ask Mike Rowe, and one question would I ask Thomas Sowell? Now let me start with Thomas Sowell. It's an excellent question. It's not something I can just give you a fast answer for. I think the question I would ask Dr. Sowell is, Dr. Sowell, I read a lot of stuff, and I continue to read a lot of stuff, and near as I could tell, if you're not the smartest guy on the earth, you're one of the three. So my question to you is, how do you get to be one of the three smartest guys in the world? Is that a intellectual barrier, or is it a moral barrier, or hurdle, I suppose I should say? What is it that allows somebody to achieve the level of expertise that you've achieved in your life? Because a lot of people will say that people are being held down because of systemic racism and all the rest. I want to know how you got there, and I want you to tell me from the inside what was hard and what wasn't hard. That's not exactly elegant, but that's that. Mike Rowe. I probably asked Mike Rowe, hey, Mike, you want to be in a movie? But you said not to be flipped, so let me think. I would ask Mike something similar. I would say, so Mike, you're an internationally recognized film and television star. And you're very, very good at it. And yet somehow you do not seem to have the contempt for working people that many people who are in your position also have. Why is that? Why don't you have such contempt for regular people that most people with your level of fame achieved through show business certainly have? And we both know people who are like this. We count the exceptions on one hand. Gary Sinise and John Voight, there's two. So what was it about you that inoculated you from looking down on regular people once you got to be a non-regular person? That's what I'd ask Mike Rowe, I think. What I asked Kamala Harris. Tom Bombadil wants to know. And by the way, Tom, I was just heartbroken when they cut you out of that first movie. I just think that was a raw deal. What I asked Kamala Harris. Huh. I would ask Kamala Harris, I would say, Madam Vice President, as has been tradition for 50 years now, the Vice President's usually in charge of the space program. You've shown an enormous amount of interest and enthusiasm for space. And we certainly saw you talking to those kids to tell them to be able to see craters on the moon with their own eyes. So just because you are essentially in charge of the space program for the United States of America, could you just tell me what the largest planet is, the smallest planet is, the hottest planet, and the coldest planet in our solar system, please? Just that. Simple. Don't have to get anywhere outside the neighborhood. Just the largest, the smallest, the coldest, and the hottest. That's what I'd like to know, please. Because if you know anything about space, I mean anything about space and astronomy and all that stuff, that's not a difficult question at all. That's a softball of softballs. That's what I'd ask her. And if she was able to answer, I have to tell you, I'd be impressed. I would be impressed. But I don't think she could do it. Tim Morris, who's really punching above his weight here today. Tim Morris, in quote, says that she would say, "The thing about space is that it's big and full of planets in space. And the planets that make up space are both large and small and hot and cold. There are hot ones and cold ones and big ones and small ones. And all of those planets together provide the diversity that makes our solar system such a beautiful place. It's that combination of big and small and hot and cold that makes the solar system so special. And that's why we want to explore the planets which are in space, because space is where you have to go to get to the planets. And in order to see the planets, you have to be able to get into space because they're in space, and planets, you have to go through space to get to a planet." Micro likes dirty jobs. Go into politics. That's a freaking great question. If I expect I'll be back on his show at some point in the future. That's a great question. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal it. I'm just going to steal it. I'm going to say, Mike, I got a quick question for you. Yeah, you did, everybody knows you from Dirty Jobs. It was just remarkable result, remarkable respect for working people, invisible people. And I loved it, and I love the reboot, and everybody else does too. So my question for you is, since you're still doing Dirty Jobs and